computers and I'm looking for the power cord for the one I'm on. So
No
I'm
problem.
happy to talk while I walk at the moment. Yeah. Okay.
Well, great. So I guess the first question we would ask is we're wondering about if you could give us some background information on the entrepreneurship programs that you do have. We know that there's a Power Up competition, and we'd love just some information on what those programs look like at the library.
Yeah. So Power Up really is the flagship. It's where we come into the most direct and consistent contact with entrepreneurs. It comes the closest to what I call direct services, where we're working with a group of people to accomplish a specific goal, and that's to get them to write a business plan. I think this is our 16th year. It's the first year doing it virtually, and we won't go into those details too much here. But over the years, we've helped a number of people start businesses, for sure. And I just ordered something from one of them yesterday. They've pivoted to be online. We do take, yes, I think you know enough about Power Up. I don't need to explain rules and the purpose.
Well, actually, I would love to have just some like an overview. Like, is it people? How many people usually are in it? Like, what do they get funding? Like, what does it look like? Kind of overview.
Very easy. Those are all easy to answer questions. So,
great.
The average applicants, meaning people who actually complete the application and begin to take classes, are between 350 and 400. And they can be, that's a team, so there might be a couple of people, 3 people on a team, but more or less it's usually an individual. And that's largely because of the ease of doing it that way. It isn't to say that they are expecting to start a business by themselves. They many times have groups of people supporting them in their business venture. We get about 20% of those applicants hand in a plan, somewhere between 80 and 100 people. 100's a really good number. And the plans vary. There are certainly better plans, and better plans win. That's the whole point. And they, what we provide is a set of classes, 4 classes: how to write a business plan, especially for our competition, how to market your business, how to do the marketing section, market research, which is the whole point of why the competition came into being, was linking people who want to start business to the information the library offers and what we, why it's important. And then the last is the financial section, and we walk them through the cash flow spreadsheet we've created. We try and keep it simple. We try and keep the classes direct and not too complicated, because these are novices. I would say, oh, I don't have my numbers in front of me and I can fill you in. I think over 50% have not had entrepreneurial training of any sort. Maybe a number close to that have not used the library before. A number of, certainly the vast majority, have never been in business before. So these are novices, they're startups. That said, some are savvier than others. We ask a question about college education, and it's actually the level of education level is pretty high. I think most people have had some college. And so there's a savviness there as well. The income level is, we use the LMI, the local regional LMI, of something like 60,000 is the cutoff for a household. And of course that's just a very general number because it varies on the size of the household, but we use a very general number. I think it comes out of HUD's.
Sorry, what is LMI?
Oh, I'm sorry. Just a sec. Low to moderate income.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So there is a figure that's used frequently amongst service providers, and we apply the regional LMI, and that's about, the most recent was 60 to 62,000 was the household income. And so, but it's 60% of that, so it's a little bit lower actually. But over 50% of the individuals qualify for what is a standard cutoff. And I can also get you the number as to what we ask them, an income level question.
Okay.
Are
And
you
then,
above- It's straightforward. It says, are you above it or are you below it? We don't go through the various, 25 to 35, so we don't have that detail.
mhm. And then what happens to folks if they win the competition?
Well, that's a good question, and we hope they go into business. So after the judge, we have 8 prizes ranging from $20,000 to $1,000, and we try and keep track of the winners. I would say every top winner has gone into business. We have seen businesses clearly that have won or are no longer in business. Lots of different reasons. I would say, I shouldn't be quoted. I really don't know on average what percent of the businesses we know have gone into business. That's a very hard question because it kind of means over time, and people do go into business. After doing the 16 years, we have people who are not in business any longer. That is not surprising. I think our average might be 7 years in business, and we certainly have businesses who are still out there and are reaching their 16-year anniversary sort of thing. So I think there's definite success. I think the numbers compare quite favorably to anybody working in the arena of low-income individuals going to business. The term technical assistance provider, I'm sure you're used to. We work with those counselors. The other piece of what we do is we have a battery of organizations that do technical assistance consulting for small businesses or startups, and they must meet with them. And so we really hope they establish a relationship with those pro bono assistance providers because that's what's going to see them through. Once they're ready to go for a loan, or once they can get help, sometimes even doing crowdfunding and other things. And we connect them up to legal clinics and other such things all along the way. Once they finish the competition and get the money, as I said, generally the winners almost always go into business. The rest of them, and certainly the people who don't even win $1,000 prize, and that's 10% of the individuals who hand in a plan, 10% of them will get a prize because that's the numbers. But the 90% who don't win a prize, it's been very hard for us to track them. We have sent surveys, we have sent email updates, and we know of many, and many do go into business. People who've been through the programs, Luke's Lobster went through the program, but he didn't win a prize. He had a different idea at that point. But so there are people who we hear of, but they aren't very good at self-reporting. So I will be honest, I do not know. One of our concerns, and to address the issue we're talking about today, and I mentioned it to Oren, is that we applied for a Google grant because about serving startups better. Our concern is that the lowest income, the individuals with the greatest barriers, are not getting through the program and handing in a plan. Or if they hand in a plan, the plan needs a lot of help. They need much more than a business plan competition to open a business. They need consistent support. They need support in their community. They need mentors. They need, I mean, I could go on. They need technology. They need access to the internet.
Absolutely.
It's a great deal. And we are a business plan competition, and I remind ourselves of that, but we can open the doors, but we aren't walking you through the doors. That is
right. And we want to talk to you like a bit later in the call about those barriers. I'm just wondering if you're aware of whether there are NYCHA residents that participate in the Power Up competition, if you know vaguely of the proportion or how many there might be, but
no, we can tell you what zip codes their address is in.
okay.
But that's all I can do. I don't even think at this point we ask for an address. No, we ask for email addresses only. I think if you really needed to track it because they all must get library cards, there would be a way, but that's a big lift. That has never been a question as to, I mean, we've never asked, are you a resident of NYCHA housing? That is definitely not something we ask.
Right.
I am sure there are residents of NYCHA housing. I mean, the percentage has gone down, but I think at one point, 10% of New York City lived in NYCHA housing. So now I think it's down to 6%, but yeah, I can't imagine that there aren't many NYCHA residents. We represent every zip code in Brooklyn. East New York has a lot of public housing. Red Hook isn't so well represented, and I know that has public housing accounts for a lot of the residents there, but East New York is pretty well represented, as is Bed-Stuy. Those are, especially Bed-Stuy, is well represented. Our minority figures are pretty high. I think it's 60% are minority. The competition is minorities, and largely African American.
So thinking about entrepreneurship in general, do you think that it could be an important pathway to economic opportunity for NYCHA residents, and why might that be?
It's an interesting question. Yes and no. I mentioned Oren. I am pretty familiar with NYCHA, maybe, or not, I shouldn't say more than any other person who provides social services. But my husband worked for NYCHA as their general counsel, so I had a sense of about different housing and some of the internal workings of NYCHA and reporting structures, and since he's been there, it is clear that NYCHA has many problems, but the people who live in NYCHA live there, they're pretty stable. They live there a while. Clearly people come through and leave, but it's also an aging population. So I think that has to be taken into account, that they're not necessarily young entrepreneurial as much as outside of NYCHA housing. I actually am not so familiar now with what the immigrant statistics are for NYCHA, but the barriers, the good thing is I do believe NYCHA's got pretty good internet. Is that not correct? Haven't they been part of a program that's boosting it? The community centers in NYCHA have gone through all sorts of changes as to being viable places for people to meet and gather. The tenants associations, I don't think are necessarily going to be able to help people disseminate information that well. So I think there are a lot of barriers to communication within NYCHA. It is not one monolithic group at all. I think each development is very unique.
Yeah, and that actually gets to one of the other questions I wanted to ask you, which is if you know of some specific challenges or obstacles that NYCHA residents face in terms of accessing entrepreneurship in general, maybe accessing your programs.
Yeah.
What are some examples that you might think of?
I think as far as the library goes, we are very close to NYCHA housing. As you've been told by the others in the system, that libraries are in every neighborhood. So every NYCHA development has a library near it. We do not have any libraries in NYCHA housing. So that is different, I think, than some of the other libraries that do have a closer connection that way. I'll speak frankly, I think it's a blessing because any capital repairs to NYCHA housing is nearly impossible to accomplish. So frankly, that's one less thing we have to worry about, and I wouldn't encourage it. But so barriers to communication is like anything, how do you communicate with individuals? And just by being in NYCHA housing doesn't mean there's a pathway. There are newsletters to NYCHA residents, but I don't know that everybody's paying attention to them. I don't think the tenants associations necessarily represent people that within one development. So I think it's really knowing about who is an important representative. Now, you probably have worked with Rees, R-E-E-S.
We're in touch. Yeah.
And I think we used to work with someone named Tishelle George. Have you worked with Tishelle? She up until recently at least, was one of the individuals working on personal finance with Reese.
I'm not sure if we worked specifically. I'm not sure. I don't remember the specific name of the person that we're working with. It's
Yeah.
someone our boss is working with them, so
Okay.
I'm not sure the specific name.
I mean, that would
I'm curious. Yeah.
be an avenue for your purposes to figure out, is that agency within NYCHA functioning well, and can they connect to individuals and get the word out? I would say that's, you know, like so many things, probably a big question.
Hmm.
I really don't know. NYCHA is unto itself, but at the same time, it's not as if people do not leave the developments.
Right.
They're interacting with the community all the time in different ways. So it might be helpful to know the local merchant associations. I don't know that bids are that effective, but the merchant associations locally might attract people.
So I'm curious if you are aware of, you know, I know that you don't necessarily know the numbers of NYCHA residents in your programs. I'm wondering what some ideas you might have that might help to maybe increase the number of NYCHA residents that participate in the entrepreneurship programs, whether it's outreach or, you know, thinking about the world normally, not necessarily during COVID. We'll get to COVID, but like normally, like what do you think would be needed in terms of getting over some of these obstacles?
Well, I do think it's if to identify who might be running a business and is a NYCHA resident. I think those stories can resonate. I think it does go development by development. However, I don't know if NYCHA has a handle on the occupations of its residents and who might be a business owner that could be a model, a role model, a mentor, possibly an employer of fellow residents. Ideally, so that would be one way of getting people motivated to be entrepreneurs. I do think traditionally, and you would know better than I do, that NYCHA residents are employed. The majority are employed. So it's a question of, are they looking for something other than being employed?
Well, assuming, let's say there are some that are, because, you know, there are a lot of barriers within NYCHA for people who do have entrepreneurial aspirations. You know, we know of people who have kind of like informal businesses, like running things out of their apartments, let's say. Like, what do you think would be needed to connect those aspirations to actually maybe taking advantage of your programs or actually formally opening a business?
Right. Well, so that's a question you would apply to anybody who's doing, who is low income probably, or maybe not so low income, but probably, who is running a business, but it isn't necessarily an official business. It might be called freelancing or side hustles. I think, yeah, I think there's a lot of barriers to that. I think one is information, not being intimidated by the number of regulations. It's a lot easier to run a business if you want an official business. I think those regulations are a huge barrier to most people. And we educate them, and I think it almost reinforces the fact that maybe they'd rather not become an official business. Yeah, we pile it on them, and I just see them all thinking, oh my God, this is way too much. I'm going to get penalized. I'm going to pay taxes. I'm going to not be able to hire people appropriately. It can be too much. So regulation is a huge issue for people in that, and culturally, they're not used to that type of regulation in many cases. So understanding the why. Access to finance is always part of the issue, but I think there are informal ways that individuals get access to finance. Include one of our winners, I think last year, came up with an app that allowed for second generation immigrants to use SUSUs. I don't know if you're familiar with the SUSU, but that's a great way for low-income individuals raising money amongst their peer groups. It's kind of a lending program, but it's used extensively. And I think looking at how those work and why they work can be as beneficial as trying to link people to loan programs. So I think some different forms of financing should be looked at very seriously. Yeah, CDFI is one thing, but I think you want to go beyond that for low-income individuals.
So do you think there's anything the Brooklyn Public Library could do specifically to increase the number of NYCHA residents in entrepreneurship programs, whether it may be outreach to NYCHA, or is there anything you think the library could do?
Well, certainly outreach has got to be one of the pathways and we have not specifically reached out to NYCHA. Once again, NYCHA having a specific way to connect could be useful. Effective communication pathways within different developments would be useful. We have, I think, worked with, and I asked the person I work with, Kerwin Pilgrim, who runs the adult learning programs, if there are NYCHA specific programs at the BPL outside of individual branches, which I know will go to the local housing developments to disseminate information, sometimes do a program at a community center if it's an active community center, usually with youth more than anything, not adults. That's the one I'm aware of. So if we could build on that, that might be useful. I will say that I'm involved with, I'm on the board of a group that runs 5 child care centers that are in NYCHA housing. That probably over the years, I thought about the fact that I should be promoting to the parents of those child care centers that could be a way to get information out there. I think it's like so many things. It's like knowing which organizations have active participants. So which NYCHA houses are active. And I do know some organizations, I think, oh, now I just forgot their name, works specifically with NYCHA. I think it's the Kingsbridge houses. Oh, I'm trying to remember their name. Oh, anyway, I'll think of it. So maybe if really our goal was to work specifically with NYCHA, I think those would be some of the connections we'd have to be looking for. You have to focus. You have to focus on which developments. You can't just say we're going to go work with NYCHA. We could say we'll work with Red Hook houses, or we'll work with I mean, the names of the housing I know are Farragut, Brevoort. I don't know, but I think you'd want to pick and target who you worked with.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
We did do that might be an interesting point here is we ran a program that was to help in-home childcare providers get started. We struggled. It was difficult. SBS actually ran a parallel program. I don't think they're running their program any longer either, but that might be an interesting place for you to ask some questions, because I do think they were targeting NYCHA residents. They felt NYCHA, because NYCHA housing actually has the requisite facility. It has elevators, it probably has sprinkler systems, all the things you need to be in place, to be legal, they could provide. So we were educating individuals as to the educational and the business side of running early childhood care. And if it's in-home, it has a very specific requirements and for certain age groups. It was really hard and then there's an application you make to the state, and our goal was to get people to fill out their applications completely, which is like a 30-page booklet. So obviously lots of barriers right off the bat to doing this, and to moving from informal, not legal to quote unquote legal. So I think that's a real good case study as to how this works and what the barriers are. And yeah. So if I were to say, to work with NYCHA residents, I would put that out there as a great idea. Help individuals start their own childcare centers, educate them of the pros and cons of doing it legally, work with the city to make sure there's reason for them to become documented businesses, meaning nothing to do with citizenship, but just registered businesses, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, we do a daily call, and we were discussing this morning how important it is to support, you know, childcare services right now, because, you know, they've really been hit by the pandemic because they can't function, but also because, like, as people, you know, start going back to work, there's going to be, again, that uptick in the need for childcare services. So I think making sure that any entrepreneurs in that sector have the help they need is crucial.
Well, and I would hazard to guess they are operating, because these are small businesses taking care of children. I can't imagine they had stopped offering their services, especially to essential workers. What they've lost is people who are not employed, who don't need their services if they're not a center but home-based. Right. Then they're vulnerable to what everyone else is. They have no source of income anymore. But I think in-home childcare really needs to be concentrated on, not center-based childcare, in-home. That's for younger children. There's more center-based care with UPK. There's more avenues now, but the in-home needs so much. It just should be a huge focus on how to do it right and do it well, and make sure the children are safe and getting what they need to be ready. That it's quality care.
Okay. Yeah. So Maud, we only have about 10 more minutes because of my Zoom account restrictions. Yeah. So I just want to hit quickly on a few more questions. We went yesterday to go into talking about, like, how, you know, COVID has affected things. Are you moving, you know, programs online? I mean, I read that you were on your website. How's that been going? Right. Again, I know you don't have a lot of specifics, but do you feel like you've been able to reach NYCHA entrepreneurs with your online programming? Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah. I don't know that we have. As I keep saying, it all depends on internet access. And I do think NYCHA has better internet access than many. But it's whether people can, what we're missing out on people who are not as well connected, which means people are certainly using their phones. The phones are the way people are getting on Zoom all the time now.
Have you seen a decrease in participation, or is it in the programs that have gone online, or do you feel generally that you're still able to meet needs?
I think it's pretty good. I think we are transitioning to more and more as we go along online, but that's what we're doing now, and we're going to be doing it for the foreseeable future. I think our numbers are pretty good. They're about the same as what they were when we do a program. Getting the word out there is a little trickier. We've lost the avenue of people coming in and getting the information, and it's going to leave people behind until there's internet access that's affordable for everybody. It's going to be a problem, and low-income individuals, they don't have it. It's not going to work. They need to learn how to create a business online. So more information more digital skills, and more information on creating websites and e-commerce is going to be essential.
Is there anything specifically that the Brooklyn Public Library has tried to do in increasing internet access?
Yes, actually, and mesh networks both in Red Hook and East New York, because we have internet capacity, and I am not the person who's worked in those two neighborhoods, but we did work to set up and support mesh networks. I know that's a big push, and there's special groups doing it. But I think that's really important. We have supported that.
Great.
I would say we should advocate with the city and the country to make internet as an essential.
Awesome. I'd like to also, before you wrap up, go back to the point about entrepreneurship versus just employment and and speaking about, NYCHA residents, but more general, just low income people, why do you think it's so important for, the library to assist in entrepreneurship versus just getting people jobs?
Well, it's not the way the economy is set up right now. I think it's very important to help people understand the different types of work available to them. I think people are confused by that sometimes. And if indeed once again, lots of regulations, ways to pay taxes if you're freelancing that you need to understand so you don't get in trouble, but also ways to help promote yourself are essential. Yes, but actually help people understand that they can kind of work for themselves. Self-employment is important, and it's a definite avenue to income. Sometimes it leads to growth, and then you can be an employer as well as self-employed. Those are somewhat different, crossover, but somewhat different. And we really do try and address the issues and help people who are freelancing understand what portions of being in business they need to apply, like marketing and taking care of their finances and a few other things like that are not onerous, that will help them grow their business and their clientele.
So you definitely see like the potential for like wealth creation with lower income entrepreneurs, NYCHA entrepreneurs, like.
Yeah,
So,
I think it's also, you just have to, because the wage situation is such that there have to be other avenues. All wages are better. That's the only way people are going to get out of that cycle, I think.
Right. And we've also been mentioning like a lot of, regulations on these entrepreneurs. And obviously, your job as a library is to help people adapt to them. But just if you, had any ideas for how those because you've just seen a lot of people struggle with them, like if you could roll some back, or like what do you think gets in the way if you were from like a policymaker's perspective?
Well, I think one might be a tax structure that is more accommodating of low-income individuals understanding how to pay their taxes and deductions and other such things. It's more equitable, and just looking at the rules and how they apply from rules. And I think the city is doing a better job. Rules about signage and garbage collection, important rules, but also ways to help people understand them. And I know the city tries to advocate through DCA and SBS, but looking at them carefully and making sure that every thing is important. I mean, we talk about legal structures. I think businesses are hopelessly confused about, sometimes there's just too much information. Keep it clean and simple. Help people understand being a DBA and that you really don't have to incorporate until there's a point to it, until you have a tax or a liability situation. Just simplify things more than complicate things. And we're guilty. We're a library. We like information. We give them too much information. I think simplify the information. I'm hoping, I think you're looking for something specific here, and I'm not sure that I'm able to provide it for you. I just think the information should be practical and applicable, that we provide them. And the choices are so many in New York City. That is part of the issue. There are so many providers right now. How can we help them through that maze? And I actually say that is one of our jobs as a library, is to help them identify where the help is and connect with it.
Great. Naomi, do you have any more questions you want to ask?
No, I mean, if there's anything we haven't asked about that you think would be important for us to know about how to connect NYCHA residents with entrepreneurial aspirations to forming a business, and maybe what role the library can have in that. Anything we haven't asked about that you think is important to consider would be helpful?
NYCHA's huge, monolithic. It is monolithic, except working with it, you have to break it down. If NYCHA, they have to be part of the process and help people get in. It's just like the public school system. You want to get in and talk to kids and parents and classes, but there's no entree to do that. Where is the connection point? How does NYCHA communicate with its residents? And can we be part of that communication process? Do they have an effective way to communicate with their residents? I don't know. I would say, I don't think so, to be honest. So that's my knowledge of my working knowledge of NYCHA. So yeah, it's a beleaguered system right now. I hope they have some capacity to address some of these issues.
Great. So we're less than a minute now. So
So this is,
I just, of course, want to thank you, Maud, for your time. This is great. You got a lot of information sort of on the process for, for what the Brooklyn Public Library is doing and how they're adapting to COVID. So, yeah,
yeah, if you have any
Yeah,
specific
thank you, Maud.
numbers on Power Up, let me know.
great. Yeah,
Thank
we'll
you, Maud.
follow up if we have any more questions. But yeah, good luck with all your efforts, and
Thank you.
yeah, stay safe.
Yeah.
All right.
If you come up with some
Thank
ways to
you.
do this, we'd love to try and apply it. Trust me.
Absolutely. Take care.
Yeah.
Take care.
All right.
Thanks for your
Bye.
work.